This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by ADM.
Welcome back to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. Well, we'll soon have a better handle on just what's going on with the crops out there, how big the crops will be this year. As we were hearing just a few minutes ago, there is the anticipation of the USDA report coming up on Wednesday. There have been areas where there have been plenty of challenges. We saw the report this week of hail 3 inches deep in that region around Cheyenne, Wyoming, Scotts Bluff, Nebraska. Then there was the hurricane that went up the East Coast. The winds were tough on some of those tobacco fields in eastern North Carolina. Cool Whitford shared the images with us, saying that those leaves can get bruised and those stalks can get twisted to hurt the quality of the tobacco crop. In the heart of the country, though, those of us who've been talking with people in the fields have been hearing that, you know what, crops are looking pretty doggone good right now. Randy Crone is president of the Indiana Farm Bureau. He farms near Evansville, Indiana, and he shared with me.
I don't want to say too much, Max, but it looks awful good. Knock on wood and keep our fingers crossed, but we've been pretty lucky to get timely rains, and we went through a short dry spell in July, but then the rain started back, and it looks awful good right now. I don't want to overestimate it, but I'll say we're well pleased. Looks like the best crop we've had in quite a few years here.
Well, Mike, as you know, it's dangerous for some of us who just go up and down the roads with windshield inspections to make assessments of crop yields. But when you talk to some of the people who've been out there in the fields, they seem to indicate the crops are indeed on track to present some good yields this year.
Well, as Matt Bennett mentioned earlier in the program, the eastern Corn Belt has certainly been somewhat of a garden spot as that pocket of dryness has worked its way westward into central Iowa. Well, Chad Colby had the chance to get out and have a conversation with agronomists in central Illinois to get an update on how things are looking there and throughout other parts of the Corn Belt.
Mike, this week I was fortunate to catch up with an agronomist from the Midwest, Stephanie Smith. She covers Indiana, but her family farms in Michigan. Of course, lots of conversation about the weather. We all know the conditions out in Iowa. They really need a drink. But here in central Illinois, where Golden Harvest was having a field day, pretty good growing conditions. It was good to talk to Stephanie about how conditions were looking in 2020.
Come this time of year, we look behind us, corn's tasseling, and we tend to forget about what that planting season was like. So in Indiana, a lot of guys got in early, and then it was very, very cold. So early season, we tended to lose some of our stand count. We got that Mother's Day frost, which kind of exaggerated the issue with even emergence. So early season was a little tough. Later planted got to be much more consistent in terms of emergence, and we got off to the races with that later planting.
Let's talk about a little bit of what you've seen maybe in the last 2 or 3 weeks in your travels. Certainly in Illinois, plenty of moisture. There's other places across the Midwest that are struggling, and even Indiana in places is starting to get a little thirsty. What are you seeing there as of late?
Chad, you're right. There are pockets across Indiana and across my travels that have been dry, but for the most part, most areas are getting pretty timely rainfalls.
For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Taking a look at footage like that, you can certainly see why crop conditions are showing so much of the crop in good to excellent condition. Thanks, Chad, for that story.
Now, agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier brings us his farm weather forecast for the nation for the week ahead. It's presented by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, whether or not.
Well, Greg, let's get into it. Up in the Pacific Northwest, it's been dry.
Yep.
We have to start getting worried about fire.
Yeah, with an upper system on the move, some cooler days ahead, but it's this particular setup that sometimes breeds these dry-based thunderstorms, so a little more lightning potential and fire potential as the week wears on. Here is this frontal boundary and trough offshore. Of course, widespread dryness and drought here. The main storm action once again down through Big Sky, Wyoming, parts of the central high plains. Boy, those hailstones and hailstorms were impressive out there. You bring that dry, cold air off the mountains, feed it into these thunderstorm complexes, and you're off and running with damaging hail. And that same setup is still in position here through the middle and late parts of the week. Severe weather potential back across parts of Nebraska. Next weather system, and here is this cool air trough on the move. Nice drop in temperatures. Don't foresee any organized, widespread moisture. A quarter inch of the gauge, but again, watch the lightning potential in the more comfortable environs in the Rogue River Basin, Willamette Valley with outdoor work with harvest harvest operations on the grain side continuing on. Core of the heat here in this part of the country, and a couple of thunderstorms over the southwestern sections, some moderate levels of humidity, kind of a dismal season with regard to the monsoon setup. A weak circulation offshore of the Bay Area, maybe a few sprinkles and low clouds there as usual in the morning. Here's that cool air settling on into the valleys of California, middle to late parts of the week. The heat easing up over the Four Corners, a couple of thunderstorms into parts of Kansas and Nebraska. Drought here a little bit better in recent weeks and through parts of the east central and southeastern plains.
Greg, as we get into the central part of the Corn Belt, I know some growers in western Iowa, eastern Nebraska would love to see a couple drops of rain. Is that in the forecast?
Boy, that big old bullseye on the drought monitor last week centered a little bit west of about Des Moines. We do foresee, after a push of some cooler, drier air and some weekend rainfall making its way into parts of the southern Great Lakes region, this frontal boundary, the leading edge of the heat, no heat wave weather pattern, but it will help to generate this, a pickup on shower thunderstorm activity, pretty snappy low and trough across the western states. The thunderstorm activity lining up from the Black Hills into the Mississippi Valley. Hopefully some goodly rains, and those will be moving as well by time into parts of Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. Otherwise, pretty comfortable weather patterns. Seasonal temperatures continue on across much of the northern and central Corn Belt. Here's the heat over the southwestern part of the country. Very weak cool front may make its way into the Red River Valley of the south. A slight drop in temperature and humidity. Tropics are quiet. A couple of thunderstorms here and there. Not much organization as you would expect this time of the year. Into the southern plains, and the perspective of a thunderstorm chance over the southwest is pretty dismal. Hot, humid weather on the southern plains, Mississippi Valley. Tropics across the western Gulf of Mexico are very quiet.
Now, the Northeast certainly caught some moisture with the tail end of Hurricane Isaias. Yep. Are they going to dry out this next week?
They'll see a little bit of dry time, then back into wet weather. There's sort of an offshore frontal boundary. It will be this one with time that will pick up the rainfall with time again. So some drought improvement here. We've seen some improvement over parts of central and southern Indiana, much of Illinois. Still a ways to go across Ohio and Michigan. But again, showers and thunderstorms in the forecast, albeit scattered coverage early in the week. We'll get into another little bubble of cooler, drier air. What a delight it was from an outdoor work perspective last week across much of the Corn Belt. So cooler here, northeast wind, south wind along this boundary, and here come the showers and thunderstorms lining up out of the western Corn Belt with time into the Ohio Valley, and still some leftover moisture and picking up in intensity over the northeastern part of the country as the week wears on. Tropics quiet across the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. Afternoon downpours across Florida. Still very wet across areas of the Carolinas. Cleanup and recovery there over eastern areas coming off the recent tropical storm hurricane. Slightly cooler air into areas of the far southern plains. There's heat and there's humidity and maybe a couple more thunderstorms in this particular corridor. Some weakness over the southwestern Atlantic. Middle to late parts of the week. We'll keep an eye on triple-digit readings over parts of Oklahoma and Texas. Otherwise, scattered showers and thunderstorms across the Gulf Coast areas. Back into parts of the Tennessee Valley. Pretty much par for the course weather for this point in August. And again, the tropics beginning to ramp on up as that Saharan dust issue continues to wind on down. More named storms here in the weeks to come.